We're hiring a software engineer to lead our engineering efforts right now. So it's a bit different than a typical software engineering role. Rich, can you talk about your vision for this role and how will they interact with you?
Yeah, there's really two parts to it. The first part is maintaining and building our internal software. And so the kind of core software that we use is like a custom CRM. It's a Rails app that allows us to track companies, or I should say projects from, promising project within the open source ecosystem all the way through to a company that we funded or started um, with, office hours and regular interactions with those founders. And so we have a whole bunch of information in that internal system. There's a bunch of like automation modules around that. So we do a lot of work in sourcing where we monitor the open source ecosystem for breakout or exciting projects. We recruit founders, which has a lot of machinations under the hood that allow us to automate and scale that. And so I kind of look at it like we have a bunch of functional leaders within OCV. We have an associate that does the sourcing of projects and tries to start companies around certain ones. We have Mel Yu, who's doing recruiting of founders. We have a marketing person that's putting out content. All of those people can be amplified with software and through automation. And so they're largely the customer of this candidate that we're pursuing now. It's like you can work with those people to decide what they're doing day to day that can be accelerated or multiplied or amplified by software. Um, so that's the first part is just our internal systems. The less sexy part is probably the sysadmin of all the
Mhm.
SaaS tools and applications that we use off the shelf.
Yeah,
Uh,
somebody needs to keep the lights on for OCV being
yeah,
able
my
to
hope is that's less than
find them.
5% of your time day to day. But it's important that we have deep engineering DNA within our organization, given what we do. And so both me and the rest of the team that does look at these projects and decides which ones we want to start and which CTOs and founders we want to recruit, it's important that we have a stakeholder in the room that's much deeper in the technology, that's going to have a voice in the conversation around why is this particular project exciting? Who is using this OSS and why? What does the landscape of alternative technical solutions look like? Someone that could really be a thought partner in the open source projects that we're getting excited about, and discover them themselves. They themselves should be embedded in this community. And then once we start a company around one of those projects, uh, we follow, largely inspired by my time at YC, office hours with those founders where we give um, feedback and advice and thought partnership to founders that are figuring it out. And I'd love to have a technical stakeholder in the room on the OCV side that's going to pressure test the advice that I'm giving and be capable of giving their own. And I'm realistic that somebody, I think we have a wide, a diverse set of backgrounds that we would consider for this role. And so I'm open to the possibility that somebody has, professional software development experience, but might be a little bit earlier in their career. Maybe they've never been a founder before. And so like they're justifiably nervous about what advice they can give,
Mhm.
founders that are probably more experienced than themselves. And the answer is you don't need to give a ton on day one. Like good advice comes from seeing lots of data points
Mhm.
and listening to good advice. And so I think someone that might be, 3, 4, 5 years into their career as a professional engineer, but not a ton of time working with 0 to 1 startups, I think pretty quickly can begin to see patterns across them, and be a helpful voice in the room as we talk about, what these companies are doing to find their early customers and, you know, what approach they're taking on the product that they want to build or their commercial MVP. I think it'd be helpful to have someone on the OCV side that's like lives and breathes engineering every day.
Okay, so this engineer needs to have some successful engineering background. Why work at OCV over joining another software engineering team? Like, why
It
not go
depends.
work for Google?
Yeah, it depends on what you want to optimize for in your career. Like, I think if you want to be the best engineer possible and best engineering manager possible, you probably don't want to take this role. I think there are people that get a technical degree in undergrad that join and are successful within an engineering organization, and they see the path in front of them and they say, I'm not in love with software development and I don't want to be an engineering manager at a software company, but I love the technology. I love like early stage innovation and what other options are out there for me. And I think the venture path is one of them. And so joining OCV in this role, whether you want to build out engineering functions within venture firms or be a venture investor yourself, I think is certainly a path. The other one is you want to be a founder or you think you might want to go earlier stage at some point. You don't know exactly what that means or whether you want to be a first employee or whether you want to be like definitely a founder. But I think like this is a career move that would give you just like a broader purview
Mhm.
of, you can look at multiple early stage companies at once from the absolute earliest stage to, 0 to 1 and then, raising their seed round from follow-on investors. And I think being able to see that across 10, 15, 20 companies from like literal inception or company formation to raising a round from outside investors is a pretty cool position to be in. And to do it alongside me and the rest of the OCV team, I think is a pretty cool seat. So I think people that are looking for those kinds of moves, this is super appealing to. Um, versus people that are looking to like progress within their software development career on like that traditional ladder. I don't think this is a good fit for.
Okay. So there is some of the basic, not necessarily interesting work of just sysadmin keeping the lights on. Then there is the more interesting engineering work of I'm going to look at all of these internal processes and make them way more efficient and be able to improve the tools that are used by our companies as well as OCV internally. And then being able to be your thought partner, discuss a lot of different ideas. And my guess is you're going to bring up technologies that they might not know about. So they will quickly become the subject matter expert, leaning into just their expertise in software engineering and be able to go deeper on that.
Yeah, we want them to be poking around these projects themselves out of intellectual curiosity. I'll also say like a lot of the internal tooling or automations that you're building for OCV, like we should embrace the off-the-shelf tools and the no-code solutions and the vibe coding platforms that are available now. Having someone that has an engineering background that's like pushing the limits of the types of tools that we're willing to consider and kind of leading the pack internally
Mm-hmm.
uh, on those types of things is important.
Gotcha. The other thing just want to lean into is just the personality type that is best for this.
We have a 7-person team, right? So every person we hire is kind of the CEO or GM of their particular domain.
Yeah.
And what's implicit in that is that you're kind of deciding what the role actually, you're kind of defining the role yourself.
Yeah.
And on one hand, I think for the wrong candidate, that'll create like an ambiguity that will make you anxious and uncomfortable about what the scorecard really is. I think for the right candidate, it's incredibly empowering to say like, oh, you're going to actually be the author or architect of what engineering at OCV actually means. Be a little bit precocious in what they take on and
Mm-hmm.
how they try to contribute than someone that's a little bit less. I think I'd rather you make mistakes by leaning in too far. I think the people that have succeeded most at OCV have just like jumped in and kind of grabbed their own space and started making huge impact.
Gotcha. Can you talk about any of the technical challenges that our portfolio companies face that this engineer could help with?
The real question is you have this open source project, which in some sense has product market fit because it's being used. But what's being used is the open source software. And what we need to figure out is what proprietary features or services are we going to build around it or on top of it that we can charge for. And so it always starts with, okay, who's using it and why? And do we see pull from other features or capabilities that we can build? And so I think it's easy for me to pressure test what founders are learning by talking to their users and to like give guidance about how to navigate those conversations and where the pockets of opportunity might be. But having like an actual engineer that's living and breathing this every day as a pressure test to me and to those founders would be super helpful. And I think that's one of the things that we're looking for in a candidate here.